The way I think about the 17th century is the century begins with the region that is the Chesapeake as a region dominated by Indians, by Native Americans, their cultures, their peoples, their languages, their religions. And by the end of the 17th century, that same region is no longer dominated by Native Americans, although they still play a profoundly important role. They're still powerful, but they aren't dominant. The dominance has been shifted to the colonists who now control, especially the coastal strip of this region. They control it militarily and politically, but they still don't really control it culturally. And partly they don't because of the tremendous diversity that is increased after 1670 by so many Africans coming to this region.
In Carolina, African slaves formed a majority of the colony's population almost from the first. But in the Chesapeake region, the institution of slavery grew more gradually.
In the early period, certainly in Virginia, there were both whites and blacks in the field, and they were normally, probably in most cases, treated more or less the same in terms of the working day. It was with the shift from white indentured servants to African labor, and the shift in Virginia in the 17th century from white to black, that there in many ways was a conscious decision to use race as a dividing line.
Bacon's rebellion served as a moment of political transition, after which social divisions were more clearly delineated along racial lines.
Although white indentured servants were exploited, sometimes ruthlessly, there were some aspects of slavery that they were spared. The essential aspects of slavery is that the person serves for a lifetime and that the condition is inheritable, so that even if an indentured servant served for most of his life, in the sense that he died early, his descendants, if he had any, would not be enslaved.
One hallmark of the Southern colonies is the early concentration of wealth and power in the hands of an elite class of land and slave owners. Staple crops, forced labor, and the emergence of a rigid racial hierarchy came to characterize the South in the early years of English settlement on the continent.
Ownership is very important, and all the colonies that succeed operate on this basis, that people who come get land, at least in the first generation. But ownership also is a double-edged sword, because it's also then extended to ownership of labor. And it's exactly the same principle, I think. It's certainly clear to me, at any rate, that the principle of private property in land, which has been so important, also is exactly the same principle of private property in labor. So that it's a very much a mixed tradition right from the beginning, I think.